The sound of my life falling apart wasn't a bang or a whimper. It was a rhythmic, metallic thud-thud-thud against solid oak, echoing through the hallway at exactly 6 a.m. on a Saturday. I was awake, mostly because my bladder is on a schedule that doesn't respect the concept of the weekend. But I wasn't awake. I was in that fugue state where you're trying to remember if you're a human being or just a vessel for coffee. I shuffled out of the bedroom, scratching my stomach, wearing boxer shorts with little tacos printed on them. Dignity wasn't really on the menu yet, and made my way to the front door. I peered through the peephole. Nothing. Just the distorted view of my front porch and the overly manicured hedges that the oaks at Whispering Creek Homeowners Association required us to trim to precisely 36 inches. Then doked. I unlocked the deadbolt and swung the door open. There was nobody there. The street was empty, save for the early morning fog clinging to the asphalt and the distant, annoying chirp of a bird that sounded like it was mocking me. I looked down. There, nailed, literally nailed, to my mahogany doorframe at eye level was a thick envelope. The nail was a rusted, jagged thing, the kind that leaves a mark you can't sand out. It was a violation of the wood, sure, but the real violation was inside the envelope. I yanked it off, splintering a piece of the trim, and ripped it open. The paper inside was heavy, bonded, the kind lawyers use to tell you that you're screwed in expensive font. Notice of foreclosure and liens enforcement. The words swam in front of my eyes. I blinked, rubbed my face, and read it again. Property, 402 Maple Drive. Owner, Jack Miller. Outstanding balance, $12,414.32. Action. Immediate foreclosure proceedings initiated pursuant to HOA Bylaw 4.2. Vacate date, 30 days from receipt. I stood there, the morning chill hitting my bare legs, my taco boxers suddenly feeling very inadequate for the gravity of the situation. $12,000? I didn't owe anyone $12,000. I paid my mortgage on the first of the month, every month, like a robot. I paid my taxes. I paid my car note. My eyes scanned down to the itemized list of charges. Base infraction, $50. Late fee, X 8 weeks, $800. Administrative processing, $1,500. Legal counsel. Retainer, $5,000. Interest. Compounded daily, $3,214.32. Damages to community aesthetic, $1,850. I felt the blood rising from my chest to my ears. It started as a warmth and quickly turned into a roar. This wasn't a mistake, this was a hit. I looked across the street. The curtains in the house opposite mine twitched. That was Brenda's house. Brenda, the HOA president. Brenda, the woman who once measured my grass with a ruler while I was eating a sandwich on my porch. I gripped the paper until it crumpled. They were trying to take my house. My 3-bedroom, 2-bath sanctuary where I worked, slept, and played video games in peace. And they were doing it over a base infraction of $50. I slammed the front door, ignoring the new hole in the frame, and marched into the kitchen. I needed coffee. And then, I needed to remember exactly how this nightmare had started. It started, as most wars do, with something incredibly stupid. 2 months ago, life was good. I'm a software engineer, which means I spend 90% of my life in a darkened room typing code, and the other 10% wondering if I should go outside. When I bought the place at the Oaks at Whispering Creek, I thought I was buying peace and quiet. The realtor, a woman with too many teeth and a perfume that smelled like desperation, had assured me, "The HOA keeps property values high, Jack. It keeps the riffraff out." I didn't realize riffraff included people who breathe wrong. The inciting incident happened on a Tuesday. Trash day is Tuesday. Recycling is also Tuesday. The rule, written in the sacred tome of the HOA handbook, a binder thick enough to stop a bullet, states clearly, refuse containers may be placed on the curb no earlier than 6 p.m. on Monday and must be retrieved and concealed from public view by 8 a.m. on Tuesday. That Tuesday, I had a conference call with a client in Tokyo at 7 a.m. The call ran long because the client wanted to discuss the color of a button for 45 minutes. By the time I hung up and rubbed the sleep out of my eyes, it was 8:14 a.m. I ran outside in my slippers. The garbage truck had already come and gone. The recycling truck, however, was just turning the corner at the end of the block. I grabbed my blue bin and sprinted down the driveway, waving like a lunatic. The driver saw me, stopped, and let me dump my cardboard. I walked back up the driveway, dragging the empty bin. I left the bin by the garage door. Just for a second. I really had to pee. I went inside, used the bathroom, poured a cup of coffee, and checked my email. Maybe 15 minutes passed. When I went back outside to pull the bin into the garage, it was there. A neon orange sticker slapped onto the lid of my recycling bin. Violation. Improper receptacle placement. Time observed. 8:19 a.m. Fine. $50. I stared at the sticker. 8:19 a.m. 19 minutes past the deadline. I peeled the sticker off, leaving a nasty sticky residue, and looked around. The street was empty. It was like a ninja had done it. A beige cardigan-wearing ninja. I figured it was a warning. Nobody actually fines you for 19 minutes, right? Wrong. 3 days later, the letter came. A formal invoice for $50. I scoffed. I actually laughed out loud in my kitchen. $50, I said to my toaster. For bringing my bin in 20 minutes late. I walked outside to get the mail, still holding the invoice, and saw Mr. Henderson 2 doors down. Mr. Henderson is a legend. He's about 80 years old, a retired structural engineer who built bridges in the 70s, and now spends his days aggressively washing his 1985 Ford F-150. He hates the HOA with the fire of 1,000 suns. "Hey, Mr. Henderson," I called out, waving the paper. He looked up from his polishing, squinting against the sun. He walked over to the property line, careful not to step on the grass because Brenda had sent a memo about excessive foot traffic causing soil compaction. "What did they get you for, kid?" Henderson asked, his voice sounding like gravel in a blender. "Recycling bin," I said. "Left it out until 8:20. Henderson spat on the ground. "Brenda, though, she's on the warpath." "It's $50, I said. "It's annoying, but whatever. I'll just pay it and move on." Henderson shook his head slowly. "It's not about the $50, Jack. It's about the playground." "The what?" "The playground," Henderson said, pointing a soapy sponge toward the community common area, a patch of grass near the entrance that was currently empty, except for a sad-looking bench. "Brenda wants to install a state-of-the-art jungle gym, imported from Sweden. Cost is $40,000. The reserve fund is empty because she spent it all on those ridiculous solar-powered streetlights that don't work when it's cloudy. She needs cash. She's fining everyone. Johnson got hit for $100 because his mailbox flag was faded pink instead of fire engine red." "You're kidding." "I wish I was. She's squeezing us, Jack. She wants that playground for her grandkids to use when they visit twice a year. We're paying for her legacy." I looked at the invoice again. "Well, she's not getting a dime more than this $50. "Just pay it," Henderson advised, lowering his voice. "Don't fight her on the small stuff. She plays dirty. She's got the bylaws memorized better than the Bible." "I'll walk it over there right now," I said. "Get it over with." That was my first mistake, thinking I could just handle it like a normal human interaction. I walked across the street to Brenda's house. Her house is the crown jewel of the neighborhood, if your definition of a jewel is something cold, hard, and lifeless. The grass was cut so evenly it looked like green carpet. There were garden gnomes arranged in a formation that looked disturbingly like a military phalanx. I rang the doorbell. It played the first few bars of Beethoven's Fifth Symphony. Dun 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 duh. The door opened, and there she was, Brenda. She was a small woman, tight curls of gray hair sprayed into a helmet that could withstand a hurricane. She wore a floral blouse and a look of permanent disapproval. "Can I help you, Mr. Miller?" she asked. She didn't say, Jack. It was always Mr. Miller. "Hi, Brenda," I said, putting on my best neighborly smile. "I got this note about the bin. Look, I was on a work call, got it in a few minutes late. My bad. I pulled my checkbook out of my back pocket. I had already written the check for $50. I just wanted to drop this off personally, so we're square. She looked at the check in my hand like it was a dead rat. She didn't reach for it. She just stared at it. Then up at me. I cannot accept that, she said. What? It's a check. It's money. Please refer to the revised payment guidelines distributed in the January newsletter, she said, her voice monotone. All punitive fines must be paid via certified cashier's check, delivered via certified mail to the HOA PO box. We do not accept personal checks, and we certainly do not accept hand deliveries at the president's private residence. This is harassment, Mr. Miller. Harassment? I laughed. It was a nervous laugh. Brenda, I'm standing on your porch trying to give you money. How is that harassment? You are invading my personal space and attempting to circumvent protocol. If you wish to contest the fine, there is a form for that. If you wish to pay, follow the procedures. She began to close the door. Brenda, come on, I said, instinctively reaching out to hold the door. Not to push it, just to stop it from slamming in my face. My fingers brushed the wood. Don't you touch my property! She shrieked. It was a sound that made my teeth hurt. I will add a citation for aggression. Get off my porch! The door slammed shut. I heard the deadbolt slide home. Then I heard the beep of her security system arming. I stood there on her welcome mat, which said live, laugh, love in ironic cursive, holding my $50 check. Fine, I muttered. You want to play hardball? I'll mail the damn check. But I didn't mail the check. Not immediately. I went home, threw the check on my desk, and sat down to work. I thought, I'll go to the bank on Friday, get the cashier's check, and mail it. But Friday came, and I had a server crash at work. I worked through the weekend. Monday came, and I forgot. By the next Wednesday, the second letter arrived. Notice of non-payment. Original fine, $50. Late fee, $100. Total due, $150. $100? I shouted at the ceiling. That's a 200% markup in a week. I called the number on the letterhead. It went to a voicemail. You have reached the Oaks at Whispering Creek Management Line. Leave a message. I left a message. It was polite, mostly. Hi, this is Jack Miller. I tried to pay Brenda. She wouldn't take it. I'm not paying a late fee when I tried to pay on time. Call me back. They didn't call back. A week later, $350. 2 weeks later, $800. I finally went to the bank, got a cashier's check for the original $50, and mailed it certified. 3 days later, the envelope came back. Returned to sender. Refused. Insufficient funds. They wouldn't take the $50 because the balance was now $800. They wanted the full amount or nothing. And that brought us to today. To the rusty nail in my door frame. To the $12,400 lien. To the threat of my house being sold out from under me because I took a piss before bringing in my recycling bin. I sat at my kitchen table. The foreclosure notice spread out before me like a battle map. The coffee was bitter. I hadn't put sugar in it. I didn't deserve sugar. I deserved a plan. My phone buzzed. It was a text from my buddy Dave. Dave is a lawyer. Not a property lawyer. He does corporate tax law for a massive firm downtown. But he's the kind of guy who knows how to argue with a waiter about a bill and win. Me, you up? Dave. It's Saturday morning. Unless you're dying or have donuts, no. Me. HOA just served me foreclosure papers. Dave. Calling you now. The phone rang immediately. I picked up. Foreclosure? Dave didn't say hello. Jack, how much do you owe? Did you stop paying the mortgage? No, I owe $50. Well, they say I owe $12,000. I explained the whole saga. The bin, the check, the refusal, the compounding interest that would make a loan shark blush. Dave listened, humming occasionally. Okay, he said finally. Here's the thing. In this state, HOAs have super lien priority, meaning if they file it right, they can actually foreclose on you even if you're current on your mortgage. It's insane, but it's legal. So I lose my house over a bin? Not if we fight it, Dave said. But court is expensive. You hire a real estate attorney, you're looking at $5,000 just to start. And Brenda knows that. She's banking on you folding and paying the $12,000 just to make it go away. I don't have $12,000, Dave. I just bought a new server rack and, well, I don't have it liquid. Then we need to get dirty, Dave said. I could practically hear him grinning through the phone. HOAs are powerful, but they are also usually run by incompetent narcissists. They always mess up the paperwork. Always. You need to find a procedural error, a loophole. Where do I look? The bylaws, Dave said. Not the handbook they give you when you move in. That's the simplified version. You need the original articles of incorporation and the master deed. The stuff filed with the county back when the place was built. Go to the county clerk's office on Monday. Dig deep, find me a typo, find me a missed filing date, find me something. Monday, I said. Okay. I'm going to bury this woman, Dave. That's the spirit, but Jack? Yeah? Don't do anything stupid in the meantime. Don't throw eggs at her house. Don't confront her. She wants you to lose your temper. That helps her case. I'm the picture of Zen, I lied. I hung up. I wasn't Zen. I was a coiled spring. But Dave was right. I needed ammunition. I spent the rest of the weekend stewing. I watched Brenda from my window. I saw her walking the neighborhood with a clipboard, noting down infractions. A dead branch on the Smiths' lawn. A tricycle left out at the Garcias. She was tallying up her playground fund, victim by victim. Monday morning, I took the day off work. I drove downtown to the county clerk's office. It was a drab building that smelled of floor wax and despair. The clerk was a guy named Steve. Steve looked like he had been working there since the Taft administration. He wore a short-sleeved dress shirt and a tie that stopped halfway down his stomach. "Help you?" Steve asked, not looking up from his crossword puzzle. "I need the original incorporation papers for the Oaks at Whispering Creek," I said. "Found it around 1985, I think." Steve sighed, a long, rattling sound. "Microfiche," he said. "Bless you." "No, it's on microfiche. Basement level, aisle 4. I went to the basement. It was like entering a tomb. I found the cabinet for 1985 and started scrolling through the film. It took 2 hours. My eyes were watering from the backlight of the ancient machine. And then I found it. Articles of Incorporation. The Oaks at Whispering Creek, 1985. I hit print. The machine whirred and spat out 30 pages of warm paper. I sat on the cold floor and started reading. It was mostly standard legal boilerplate. The board shall consist of 5 members. Quorum shall be established by... I read about the drainage easements. I read about the roof shingle requirements. And then, on page 22, Article 9, Section C, I stopped. I read it again. I read it a third time. A slow smile spread across my face. It was a smile that would have terrified my mother. Article 9, Section C, Preservation of Agrarian Character. In accordance with the county land grant of 1984, the association is mandated to maintain the designated 1-acre plot located at the northeast corner of the development as a community victory garden. This land is to remain arable and accessible to all residents for the purpose of personal agriculture. On failure to maintain this agricultural zone for a period of 12 consecutive months renders the presiding board of directors in breach of charter. In the event of such a breach, the association's corporate charter may be dissolved by a simple majority vote of members present at any called meeting, bypassing the standard requirement of a 75% majority of all homeowners. I looked at the map attached to the document. I traced the lines with my finger. The northeast corner, the 1-acre plot. My heart started pounding. The northeast corner of the Oaks at Whispering Creek wasn't a garden. It hadn't been a garden since I moved in. I knew exactly what it was. It was a paved private parking lot. Specifically, it was the board member reserved parking zone and the location of the HOA maintenance shed. Boy. Brenda parked her Mercedes there every single day to keep it out of the sun under a nice, expensive carport structure. They had paved paradise to put up a parking lot. And according to the 1985 charter, if that land wasn't arable, meaning capable of growing crops, For 12 months, the board was illegal. And if the board was illegal, I didn't need the whole neighborhood to vote them out. I just needed the people in the room. "Steve," I yelled, running back up the stairs. "I need a certified copy of this. And a stamp. A big official stamp." Steve looked at me, bored. 50 cents a page. "I'll give you $20, I said. "Just stamp it hard." I walked out of that building with the weapon I needed. But a piece of paper wasn't enough. I needed proof. Physical, undeniable proof that the land was dead. I needed to show that you couldn't grow a tomato in Brenda's parking spot. I needed a contractor. I pulled out my phone and searched for heavy-duty landscaping. Demolition. I found a listing for Big Tony's earth movers. We dig it, you fill it. I dialed the number. "Tony speaking," a voice boomed. It sounded like a cement mixer gargling gravel. "Tony, this is Jack. I have a job. It's a gardening project." "I don't plant petunias, pal. I move dirt." "I don't need petunias," I said. "I need a soil assessment. I need you to drill a hole through 6 inches of asphalt to prove that the dirt underneath is unavailable. Can you bring a jackhammer?" "I can bring a backhoe with a breaker attachment, but that costs extra." "Tony," I said, looking at the foreclosure notice still crumbled in my pocket. "I'm willing to pay. Can you meet me tomorrow at 7 a.m.? "Address?" I gave him the address of the HOA parking lot. "See you there, Jack." I hung up. I looked at the sky. It was a beautiful day. The birds were singing, and tomorrow morning I was going to wake up Brenda with the sweet, sweet sound of a jackhammer tearing apart her private parking space. Game on. The morning of the soil assessment arrived with a sky the color of a fresh bruise. It was 6:45 a.m. I stood on the sidewalk across from the Community Victory Garden, currently known as the board member reserved parking lot, clutching a thermos of coffee like a grenade. I was wearing my gardening clothes, which consisted of a pair of jeans I hadn't worn since college and a flannel shirt that made me look less like a farmer and more like a hipster barista who got lost on the way to a poetry slam. In my other hand, I held a thick plastic binder. Inside were the certified 1985 Articles of Incorporation, a highlighted copy of the county land grant, and a printed permit from the city website titled Restoration of Existing Agricultural Zones. I had paid $25 for the permit online. It was technically for people fixing up old barns, but the drop-down menu didn't have an option for spite-based asphalt removal. The neighborhood was silent, the kind of silence that costs $300 a month in HOA fees. No dogs barking, no children laughing, just the low hum of the electric substation and the sound of my own heart trying to batter its way out of my ribcage. Then I heard it. It started as a rumble, deep and guttural, vibrating through the soles of my sneakers. It grew louder. A mechanical roar that shattered the suburban peace. A massive, rusted-out dump truck turned the corner, towing a flatbed trailer. Strapped to the trailer was a Bobcat skid steer loader equipped with a hydraulic breaker spike, a jackhammer the size of a cannon. On the side of the truck, painted in peeling white letters, was Big Tony's Earth Movers. Tony pulled up to the curb, his air brakes hissing like an angry dragon. He cut the engine, but the truck shuddered for another 10 seconds before dying. Tony hopped out. He was a mountain of a man, wearing a neon yellow vest over a t-shirt that was struggling to contain him. He had a cigar unlit in the corner of his mouth and looked at the pristine neighborhood with deep suspicion. "Jack?" he grunted. "Morning, Tony," I said, walking over. "Thanks for coming on short notice." Tony looked at the parking lot. It was a beautiful slab of blacktop, freshly sealed last summer, using our dues, of course. Sitting right in the middle, under the aluminum carport, was Brenda's silver Mercedes C-Class. It gleamed maliciously. "That the spot?" Tony asked, pointing a thumb the size of a bratwurst at the pavement behind the Mercedes. "That's the spot," I said. "I need a soil sample, Tony, a deep one. I need to prove the ground underneath is compacted." Tony walked over to the edge of the lot, kicked the asphalt with a steel-toed boot, and nodded. "It's 4-inch commercial grade, gonna be loud. You got a permit for this noise?" City noise ordinance starts at 7 a.m., I said, checking my watch. It is currently 6:58 a.m. We have 2 minutes to unload. Tony grinned. It was a scary sight. I like you, Jack. You're crazy, but I like you. He unchained the bobcat. He moved with a surprising grace for a man of his size, hopping into the cage of the machine. The engine fired up with a roar that instantly set off the car alarm of a Honda Civic 3 houses down. I stood on the sidewalk, checking my watch. 6 hours, 59 minutes, and 30 seconds. 6 hours, 59 minutes, and 45 seconds. Tony positioned the massive steel spike directly over the asphalt, about 5 feet from the rear bumper of Brenda's Mercedes. 7 hours, 0 minutes, and 0 seconds. I gave him the thumbs up. Tony engaged the hydraulics. Ka-thunk, 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 ka-thunk. The sound was indescribable. It wasn't just noise, it was a physical assault. The hydraulic breaker hammered into the asphalt with thousands of pounds of force. Dust exploded into the air. Chunks of blacktop flew like shrapnel. The ground beneath my feet shook. Ow! It sounded like a dinosaur eating a tank. Lights flicked on in houses all up and down the street. Curtains were yanked open. And then, the door to 401 Maple Drive flew open. Brenda didn't walk out. She erupted. She was wearing a pink silk bathrobe and fuzzy slippers, her hair in curlers, her face a mask of pure, unadulterated fury. She looked like a banshee who had just been fired from hell for being too intense. She ran toward us, her mouth moving, but I couldn't hear a word she was saying over the K-thunk-a-thunk of Tony's machine. I held up a hand to Tony. He eased off the throttle, and the hammering slowed to a stop. The silence that followed was ringing. "Out of your mind?" Brenda was screaming, already mid-sentence. "What is this? What are you doing?" She stormed up to me, getting right in my face. I could smell her lavender night cream and her rage. "Good morning, Brenda," I said, keeping my voice calm. My hands were shaking, but I hid them behind the binder. "Lovely day for some gardening, isn't it?" "Gardening!" she shrieked. Her voice cracked. She pointed a trembling finger at the smoking crater Tony had just gouged into the parking lot. "You are destroying association property. That is a dedicated parking zone. I am calling the police. I am calling the sheriff. I am going to have you arrested, and I am going to sue you for every penny you have." "Actually, Brenda," I said, opening my binder, "according to the 1985 Articles of Incorporation, Article 9, Section C, this isn't a parking lot, it's the Community Victory Garden." "What are you talking about?" she spat. "You're delusional." "The charter requires this land to be arable," I continued, shouting slightly to be heard over the idling bobcat. "I am simply exercising my right as a resident to tend to the community crops. Tony here is helping me tilling the soil. It seems a bit hard." "Get that machine out of here," she screamed at Tony. Tony just leaned back in the cab, lit his cigar, and looked at me. "She the boss?" "No," I said. "She's just a neighbor." "Then I'm still on the clock," Tony said. He revved the engine. Brenda let out a sound that was half gasp, half scream. She fumbled for her phone in her bathrobe pocket. "I am calling 911. Do not move. Do not leave." "I'm not going anywhere," I said. "I have tomatoes to plant." Brenda retreated to her porch, phone pressed to her ear, pacing frantically. Neighbors had started to gather. "Mister?" Henderson was there, wearing a bathrobe and holding a mug of coffee, watching the scene with a look of profound satisfaction. "Morning, Jack," Henderson yelled over the fence. "Planting corn?" "Thinking about squash, actually," I yelled back. "Good soil for squash," Henderson cackled. 10 minutes later, the flashing lights appeared. 2 police cruisers rolled up the street, silent, no sirens, just the blue and red lights bouncing off the manicured lawns. Brenda ran down her driveway to meet them before they even stopped. 2 officers got out. One was a young rookie who looked terrified of Brenda. The other was an older guy, Sergeant Miller, no relation, who looked like he had been a cop for 30 years and was currently counting the minutes until retirement. I knew Miller. He had been to the neighborhood before for noise complaints when the kids played basketball too loudly. He hated these calls. Brenda was already dragging him toward me by the sleeve. "Arrest him! Vandalism, destruction of private property, disturbing the peace. Look at my parking lot." Sergeant Miller pulled his arm away gently and walked over to me. He looked at the bobcat, then at the hole in the ground, then at me. "Morning," Miller said. "Morning, Sergeant. You want to tell me why you're jackhammering a driveway at 7:15 in the morning?" "It's not a driveway, sir," I said. "It's a garden." Brenda let out a squawk. "It is a parking lot. It has been a parking lot for 20 years. "Officer," I said, holding out the binder. "This is the legal charter for the HOA. This land is designated as an agricultural zone. It is a violation of federal land grant statutes to pave over it." Miller looked at the binder. He didn't take it. He just rubbed his temples. "Sir, this is an HOA dispute. We don't enforce HOA rules." "Exactly," Brenda shouted. "But you enforce vandalism laws. He is destroying my parking spot." "It's common property," I corrected. "I own 1/150th of this land, and I have a permit." I whipped out the city restoration permit. It looked very official. It had a seal and everything. Miller took the permit. He squinted at it. "Restoration of agricultural zone, 400 block of Maple Drive." "That is a fake," Brenda yelled. "He printed that off the internet." "It's from the city clerk's portal," I said. "Officer, the HOA has illegally paved over a protected victory garden. I am simply restoring it to its original chartered state so I can plant vegetables. I hired a licensed contractor," I pointed to Tony, "to remove the illegal obstruction." Miller looked at Tony. Tony gave a little salute with 2 fingers. Miller looked back at Brenda. "Ma'am, is this common area?" "Yes, but the board voted to pave it in 1998, Brenda argued. "Did they amend the charter with the county?" I asked. "Because I checked yesterday. The charter still says Victory Garden. If they didn't file the amendment, the vote doesn't supersede the land grant." I was speaking total legal gibberish mixed with fact, hoping to confuse the issue enough to make it a civil matter. Miller looked between us. He saw a woman in a bathrobe screaming about a parking spot, and a guy with a binder and a permit talking about victory gardens. He did the math in his head. Arrest the guy with the permit and do 4 hours of paperwork, or tell the crazy lady to call a lawyer. "Ma'am," Miller said, handing me back my permit. "If he has a permit and a claim to the land via the deed, I can't arrest him for vandalism. You all co-own this property." "What?" Brenda's eyes bulged. "He is digging a hole behind my car." "Then move your car," Miller suggested. "If he damages the vehicle, that's a crime. But digging up the dirt, that's a civil dispute. You'll have to take him to court." "I am the president of the association," Brenda shrieked. "I am the law here." Miller's eyes narrowed. That was the wrong thing to say to a cop. "Ma'am," Miller said, his voice dropping an octave, "the law is the penal code of the state, not your handbook. Keep your voice down, or I'll cite you for disorderly conduct." He turned to me. "Sir, keep the noise within ordinance limits. If you damage her car, you're going in cuffs. Understood?" "Yes, sir, we're professionals." Miller tipped his cap and walked back to his cruiser. Brenda stood there, mouth agape, watching her authority evaporate in the morning mist. "You heard the man, Tony," I yelled, my voice shaking with adrenaline. "Don't hit the Mercedes, but we need to check the soil all around it." Brenda scrambled toward her car. "Don't you dare! I'm moving it!" "Hurry up, Brenda!" I checked my watch. "We're burning daylight. These tomatoes won't plant themselves." She dove into her Mercedes, fired it up, and peeled out of the carport in reverse, narrowly missing the pile of rubble Tony had already created. She screeched backward down the driveway and parked on the street, fuming behind the wheel. "Okay, Tony," I said, feeling a surge of power I had never experienced in my life. "The car is gone. Rip it all up." "You got it, boss." Tony ramped the Bobcat up. For the next 3 hours, the neighborhood was treated to the symphony of destruction. Tony didn't just drill holes. He peeled the asphalt up like a scab. He piled massive chunks of blacktop into a mound in the center of the lot. He exposed the brown, dead, compacted earth underneath. By 10 a.m., The pristine board member parking lot was a disaster zone. It looked like a bomb had gone off. The carport was still standing, but it was now sheltering a pile of dirt and broken rocks. I walked into the middle of the devastation. I knelt down and scooped up a handful of the dry, dusty soil. Boy, I put it in a Ziploc bag. Evidence. Brenda was watching from her living room window. I could see her on the phone, likely screaming at the HOA's lawyer. I waved the bag of dirt at her. She slammed the blinds shut. I paid Tony in cash. He wiped his hands on a rag and looked at the carnage with artistic pride. "Nice garden," he said. "Good luck with the squash." "Thanks, Tony." As Tony drove away, leaving a trail of dust, I walked back to my house. My adrenaline was crashing, and I felt exhausted. But I wasn't done. Phase 1 was complete. The breach was proven. Now I needed to rally the troops. I spent the afternoon drafting a flyer. I used the bright yellow paper I usually saved for garage sales. Emergency town hall, meeting topic, the return of the Victory Garden, and lowering your dues, tonight at 7 p.m., Community Center. Hosted by the Resistance. I didn't put my name on it. I printed 200 copies. At 4 p.m., I started walking. I went to every single house in the neighborhood. I skipped Brenda's house, obviously, and the houses of her 3 cronies on the board, the treasurer, a guy named Phil who measured people's grass with a laser level, and the secretary, a woman named Janice who once fined a kid for drawing with chalk on the sidewalk. I knocked on doors. The first house was the Smiths. Tom Smith opened the door, looking harried. A toddler was screaming in the background. "Hey, Tom," I said. "Sorry to bother you. You hear the noise this morning?" "Hard to miss," Tom said. "Brenda's parking lot got nuked. Was that you?" "It was," I admitted. "Look, Tom, Brenda is trying to foreclose on my house over $50. I found a way to stop her. But I need help. I found a way to dissolve the board." Tom's eyes widened. "Dissolve the board? Is that possible?" "If we show up tonight," I said. "If we vote, we can fire them all. No more fines for tricycles. No more threats about the wrong shade of mulch." Tom took the flyer. He looked at it like it was a treasure map. "I'll be there, and I'll bring the wife." "Spread the word," I said. "We need numbers." I went to the next house, and the next. The response was overwhelming. It turned out everyone hated Brenda, everyone. Even the people who followed the rules hated her because they lived in fear. I heard stories I didn't even know about. Mrs. Gable, a widow in her 70s, told me Brenda had fined her for having a bird feeder that attracted unauthorized squirrels. "I like the squirrels," Mrs. Gable whispered, clutching the flyer. "I'll come." Mr. Patel, who worked night shifts, told me Brenda had threatened to tow his car because it was parked in his own driveway for more than 48 hours without moving. "I will be there," he said grimly. By 6 p.m., the atmosphere in the neighborhood had shifted. It was electric. People were standing on their porches, talking to each other across the lawns. Something discouraged by the handbook, loitering. They were looking at the community center, a small brick building at the entrance of the subdivision. Usually HOA meetings were attended by 5 people. The board, and maybe one poor soul trying to get permission to build a shed. Tonight felt different. Tonight felt like a revolution. I went back home to change. I put on a suit. If I was going to execute a coup, I wanted to look the part. I grabbed my binder of evidence, the bag of dirt, and the Ziploc bag containing the asphalt chunk. As I walked out the door, my phone buzzed. It was Dave. "Dave, you alive?" "Me, barely. Parking lot is gone." "Dave, you actually did it? You madman? Did you get arrested?" "Me, nope. Civil matter." "Dave, brilliant. Now remember the plan for tonight. You have to let her open the meeting. You have to let her establish that the meeting is in session. Then you interrupt. Point of order. Don't let her adjourn. If she tries to leave, you hold the vote anyway." "Me, got it." "Dave. And Jack?" "Me. Yeah?" "Dave. Don't get cocky. She's going to have the HOA lawyer there." I froze. I hadn't thought of that. Of course she would call the lawyer. The HOA retained a firm, Salyer and Salyer. They were sharks. I took a deep breath. Sharks or not, I had the truth. and I had a bag of dirt. Antwerp. I walked to the community center. The sun was setting, casting long shadows across the street. The wreckage of the parking lot was silhouetted against the orange sky, a monument to my stubbornness. When I got to the center, the parking lot was full. Cars were parked on the grass, a finable offense. People were streaming in. I walked into the hall. It was packed. There were folding chairs set up, but they had run out. People were standing along the walls. There must have been 150 people there. The noise was deafening, a low roar of chatter and complaints. At the front of the room, on a raised dais, sat the board. Brenda sat in the center. She was no longer in her bathrobe. She was wearing a power suit that looked like it was made of steel wool. Her face was pale, her lips a thin white line. Next to her were Phil and Janice, looking nervous. And on the end, sitting separate from the board, was a man in a sharp gray suit. He had slicked back hair and a briefcase. The lawyer. I took a breath and walked down the center aisle. The crowd parted for me. Someone patted me on the back. It felt like walking into a boxing ring. I took a seat in the front row, directly across from Brenda. I placed my binder on the empty chair next to me. I placed the bag of dirt on top of it. Brenda's eyes locked onto the dirt. Her nostrils flared. She banged the gavel. It sounded like a gunshot in the crowded room. "Order!" she shouted into the microphone. "Order in the hall!" The room quieted down, but it wasn't a respectful silence. It was the silence of a predator waiting to pounce. "This emergency meeting is called to order," Brenda announced, her voice trembling with suppressed rage. "We are here to address the criminal actions of a resident, Mr. Jack Miller, and to approve an emergency special assessment of $500 per household to repair the vandalism done to the board parking area." A groan went through the room. $500? Someone shouted from the back. "Fix it yourself, Brenda." "Order!" Brenda slammed the gavel again. "Mr. Miller has destroyed essential community infrastructure. We have counsel present, Mr. Sawyer, who will explain the legal ramifications and the immediate eviction proceedings we are initiating against Mr. Miller." The lawyer stood up. He adjusted his tie. He looked bored and expensive. "Thank you, Madam President," Sawyer said, his voice smooth. "Ladies and gentlemen, the actions taken today were a direct violation of the covenants. The association has no choice but to levy this assessment to restore the property. Furthermore, we will be seeking full damages from Mr. Miller." He looked at me with a smirk. It was time. I stood up. My legs felt like jelly, but I kept my face hard. "Point of order, Madam President," I said. My voice wasn't amplified, but the room was quiet enough that everyone heard it. Brenda glared at me. "You are not recognized, Mr. Miller. Sit down." "I am a member of this association," I said, stepping into the aisle, "and under Robert's Rules of Order, a member may raise a point of order regarding a breach of charter at any time." "There is no breach," Brenda snapped. "The only breach is you digging up my parking spot." "Actually," I said, lifting the binder, "that is the breach." I turned to the crowd. "Neighbors, the lawyer here says I destroyed property, but the 1985 charter, the document that created this HOA, states that the land I dug up is legally required to be a victory garden, a farm, for us." I held up the bag of dirt. "This morning I proved that the board has paved over our land for their own private use. They have maintained this illegal parking lot for over 20 years, and according to Article 9, Section C, I paused for effect. I looked at the lawyer. His smirk faltered. He whispered something to Brenda. Brenda ignored him. "True, Section C states that if the garden is not maintained for 12 months, the board is in breach, and when the board is in breach, they lose their authority to govern." "Lies!" Brenda screamed. She stood up, knocking her chair over. "That charter was amended. We voted on it." "Did you?" I asked. "Did you file it with the county? Because I have the certified records from yesterday. No amendment was ever filed. You just paved it and hoped no one would notice." The lawyer was frantically flipping through his own papers now. He looked less bored. "And here is the kicker," I shouted, turning back to the room. "The charter says that if the board is in breach, we don't need a massive vote to dissolve the corporation. We only need a simple majority of the members present in this room." A gasp went through the crowd. Then a murmur. Then excited chatter. "Dissolve it!" someone yelled. "You mean no more HOA?" "No more HOA," I confirmed. "No more fines. No more liens. No more Brenda telling you what color your curtains can be." "Sit down!" Brenda shrieked. She was banging the gavel so hard I thought the handle would snap. "Mr. Salyer, make him stop. This is a mutiny." The lawyer stood up. "Mr. Miller, this is a highly irregular interpretation of the statutes. We would need to litigate the validity of the 1985 text versus the common law practice of—" "We don't need to litigate anything," I interrupted. "The bylaws are the contract. You know that. Stick to the text." I turned to the room. I raised my hand. "I motion to declare the board in breach of charter for failure to maintain the Victory Garden," I yelled. "Second," shouted Mr. Henderson from the third row. He stood up, shaking his cane. "I second the motion." "You cannot vote on that," Brenda yelled. "I am the chair. I decide the motions." "Not when the motion is about the chair's legitimacy," I countered. "The floor belongs to the assembly." I looked at the sea of faces. They were tired. They were broke. They were sick of the letters and the judgments. "All in favor of declaring the board in breach?" I asked. It wasn't just a majority. It was a tidal wave. "Aye!" The sound shook the walls. Hands shot up everywhere. It was unanimous, minus the 3 people on the stage. "The ayes have it," I said, my heart hammering. "The board is in breach." Brenda looked like she was having a stroke. She turned to the lawyer. "Do something." The lawyer closed his briefcase. He saw the writing on the wall, or rather, the shouting in the room. "Madam President, if the bylaws truly say that, and if you didn't file the amendment," he shrugged, "I can't stop a quorum vote." He stepped away from her. The rat was leaving the sinking ship. Now for the second motion," I said. I walked right up to the stage. I looked Brenda in the eye. "I motion to dissolve the Oaks at Whispering Creek Homeowners Association, Inc., effective immediately, and to transfer all common assets to the city as public parkland." "Second!" yelled Tom Smith. "All in favor?" "Aye!" The roar was deafening. People were cheering. Someone threw a hat in the air. "Opposed?" I asked. "Nay!" Brenda screamed. "Nay, nay!" Phil and Janice squeaked out a weak nay. "The ayes have it," I declared. "Motion carries. The HOA is dissolved." I looked at Brenda. "You're fired, Brenda. And since the corporation no longer exists, my debt is cancelled. There's nobody left to pay." Brenda stood there, trembling. She looked out at the cheering crowd, at her neighbors who were hugging each other. She looked at the lawyer who was already walking out the side door. She looked at me. You petty little man," she hissed. "You ruined everything. Who is going to mow the entrance? Who is going to maintain the standards?" "We will," I said. "Or we won't. But it's our choice now, not yours." I turned my back on her and walked into the crowd. I was mobbed. People were shaking my hand, slapping my back. Mr. Henderson hugged me, smelling of peppermint and old wool. "You did it, kid," he said. "You actually did it." It was over. The tyranny of the beige cardigans was over. The aftermath was swift and chaotic, but in a good way. Within a week, the legal dissolution papers were filed. Without the corporate structure, the lien on my house evaporated. You can't owe money to a ghost. The city accepted the transfer of the common lands. The Victory Garden, aka the ruined parking lot, was designated as a future pocket park. Walking through the neighborhood a month later was a surreal experience. It wasn't perfect. Some people let their grass get a little long. Someone painted their shutters a shocking shade of purple. A boat appeared in a driveway, but it felt alive. It felt like a neighborhood, not a museum. I walked past Brenda's house. She was still there, though she rarely came outside anymore. Her curtains were drawn. I continued to the park. Big Tony was back. The city had hired him, ironically, to finish the job. He was ripping up the last of the asphalt to make way for the new swing sets and, yes, a small community garden patch. Tony saw me and waved from the cab of his excavator. Hey, Jack, he yelled. Tomatoes coming in yet? Give it time. Tony, I yelled back. I stood there for a moment, watching the machine work. I took a deep breath of the fresh air. It smelled like dirt and diesel and freedom. My phone buzzed in my pocket. It was an email, a job offer from a company in California. Senior architect. Big money, I smiled. Maybe I'd take it. Maybe I'd move. But for now, I had a recycling bin to put out. And if I left it on the curb until Wednesday morning, well, nobody was going to say a damn thing.